Welcome into the latest edition of the Pump Fake, everybody. Jarrett Bailey with you as always, and joined today by legitimately one of my favorite people in this profession that we do together. Anytime I get to see him in person, I get very excited. Anytime I get to do anything like this with him, I get very excited. But it does come with the caveat where it's kind of annoying because I know I'm going to be the second most handsome guy on my own show. But it's my good friend Taylor Kyles covering the New England Patriots for CLNS Media. Good to see you, pal. How are you?
I mean, you're killing me in the facial hair department. I kind of I'm going with something new, but I do miss the beard. It's like, even though it's hot, my chin still feels cold somehow. I don't know. It's like whatever, but I'm doing good, man. Everything's kind of winding down. I'm getting to catch up on shows and movies and kind of be a person again. So
I saw that you posted something, you and your girlfriend were watching something. I can't remember what it was. What was it?
Was it The Acolyte?
It might have been that. I've heard of
and/or Star Wars A shows.
Yeah, maybe that. I'm not a Star Wars guy. I know you are. It's just never been my thing.
You don't have to like Andor. If you are slightly intrigued by what's going on in the world, I'm not going to get too into the weeds, but if you are, I'm telling you, it is fantastic television. It literally is like an allegory for everything that we're seeing right now, but in a very enjoyable, digestible way. It's just well written, great characters, really, really good show. Honestly, not even as a Star Wars person, I'm up and down with the franchise, but that show is fire. It's fire.
I'm trying to even think of anything that I've really sat down and watched as of recently, binged or movies. It's been more of a movie kick recently. Because my girlfriend hadn't seen a ton of horror movies. So last year, it's Halloween's my favorite thing outside of Batman and stuff. So we watched all of those. We watched all the Terrifiers, which is great. Now we're getting her into Friday the 13th, which is it's just a little fun little trip. Yeah, through 80s horror.
Yeah. That's kind of when you what all of my friends who have kids say with Disney and everything. They're I finally get to watch all that stuff that I loved as a kid.
Yeah.
Now you kind of get to experience all the stuff you grew up with your girlfriend. That's sick.
Yeah. Oh, dude. By the way, speaking of Disney, so I watched 101 Dalmatians 2 yesterday for the first time. It was my background noise for work. Yeah, and I gotta say, wasn't for me.
Okay. What didn't you like? Honestly, I don't think I've seen it in 20 years, so I don't really have a strong opinion. But
the first one, legitimately one of my favorite, 3 favorite Disney movies. I love it. But the second one, yeah, just something about it I wasn't a fan of.
Is it one of the straight? It's one of the straight to VHS ones, right?
I think it was one of the straight to VHS ones. Yes. So it was 2002 or something crazy. So it was way after the original.
That was the year where Disney was just selling their souls. I do have some love for Aladdin 2. That was a banger, but
all of the Aladdin sequels I love. Yeah. Very, very I'm very biased toward all the Aladdins as well. But everybody came here for Patriots talk, so we'll hop into that real quick. We continue our little tour around the NFL. We were joined by Sal Capaccio earlier this week to talk the Bills, and now we'll talk about the New England Patriots. I've been very bullish on New England this offseason in terms of my team to go from worst in the division to playoff team. We see it almost yearly where there's one team that just has this incredible rebound year. And I think New England could be that team to do it this season. I love the additions that they've made both on defense and on offense. They entered the offseason with a ton of money to spend, much more than anybody else in the league, and they spent it. Milton Williams, Carlton Davis, bringing over Harold Landry, signing Stefon Diggs. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. And speaking, I know I'm going to be on a tangent here. I have never felt every 3 months I'm reminded that I'm getting older because there's just things I don't know. And a month ago, I found myself Googling what the hell is Tusi. And so I have to thank Stefon Diggs for that, for the boat video. Considering I had no idea. You say, okay, you don't know what it is either. All right, let's go. All right.
I watch football and television. I know very little about the outside world.
Apparently, it's some sort of that they were speculating that's what the pink substance was in the on the boat.
I thought it was a dance. Oh, geez. It's really bad. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now. That was rough.
I didn't know what it was. It does sound like it is. Let's go down to the hoedown and do the Tusi.
I thought it was just Pink Sea is what they were calling it.
Maybe that's what it was. I don't know.
That's what we've been saying.
Has that what?
Okay. No one knows what it's actually called. Nobody knows. It could be Fun Dip. It's got different names in our little community. But yeah,
it's incredible. But I mean, you've been at OTA's mandatory minicamp. What has been the biggest takeaway for you throughout the spring?
I would say that it's been competitive on both sides, and you're seeing why Mike Vrabel has the reputation he has, why his teams are the way they are. You know, people always say that teams take on the personality of their coach. What was Mike Vrabel known for? He was known for being tough. He was known for being prepared, detail-oriented, high motor, a guy who was always on verbally, physically, like he's coming at you in some kind of way. And you see that. Everyone's heard by now, like he's racing players to different stations. He's very hands-on, like he'll put the pads on, the penny, and all of that's real, but it's also the accountability that he's brought to this team that they didn't have last year, where I remember early on when players would false start or make mistakes, we wouldn't really see them run laps. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but it was just with Bill, you would see it constantly, and it always felt like there was a level of like principles in the classroom, so everybody needs to be on their P's and Q's. I don't want to say that wasn't the case with Gerard because he worked them to the bone, and I will say that. But you did see early on that there was a little bit more of an easing up on players, which at the time, Bill had, you know, his reputation after that season was kind of bad because he wasn't very open. Now Mike Vrabel is kind of the in-between, where you see he's very hands-on. He tells people how he wants things done, and when they aren't done that way, there will be consequences. But you also see where, like, there was one player who, you know, didn't get back to the huddle fast enough, and Vrabel was screaming across the field, like, get over here, what are you doing, and kind of got after him. And then after practice, you see him throw a shoulder around the guy and talk to him and be like, hey, this is the standard here. And that's what you want to see. In this day and age, you can be demanding, but players need to know why you're being demanding, and they really need to see through your eyes. Obviously, as a former player, that helps, but also someone who is away from that Belichick system, but also knows what Bill was able to do to win and carry those things over in his own way. That has just been all over, I think, this Patriots team.
I think Vrabel is one of the biggest reasons why I'm so on board with the Patriots this year. I mean, he's a proven winner. And like, what, 3-4 years ago, you had the Titans as the 1 seed. Like, there's a random year where Ryan Tannehill is the, you know, leading at the top team in the AFC record wise. And I think getting just a proven winner like that in the building, obviously a guy who has, you know, huge connections to the franchise, helping them win multiple Super Bowls and whatnot. Like, this just feels right. And I think it's perfect for Drake Maye too, because you look at how Vrabel is gone about offense historically with the Titans, where it's not taking the key away from Drake. It's just making sure that he has help. And I think with the additions of Travion Henderson to go along with Ramondre Stevenson, really nice backfield tandem will help take a lot off the quarterback's plate, but also make sure that, like, realizing, okay, we got a really talented young quarterback here who can do a lot of things that not every quarterback can do. So I think there's going to be a nice healthy balance there. What's Drake looked like so far this spring? What do you expect from him in 2025?
It's been a bit up and down, and part of that is because he's going up against a veteran defense. Like, we're going to get to them. I'm very excited about this Patriots defense. Harold Landry sounded like a small child while talking about the defense because of how excited he was. But when you're facing that kind of competition, you don't want it to be every day the offense is getting pummeled into the ground, but you also don't want to see them popping off every day, because then it's like, all right, like, this is still a pretty young, inexperienced offense. Right. What's going on here? It's
a new offense for them too. I mean, McDaniels installing a new system.
Exactly, but you're also seeing that it doesn't look like Drake is very uncomfortable. And with McDaniels, you think a lot of post-snap operation where there's a lot of option routes. So basically, players are trying to break towards space. But with Drake, that's really been his strength going back to college, where he reads space, he reads leverage. And I asked him last year, what is your thought process? Like, how do you see defenses when you're throwing? And that was really what he said. It's not so much like how it's drawn on the paper. He actually wants for guys to break into space more often and not run routes exactly the way they're supposed to. And with Josh's offense, that's the entire point. And then even more than that, it's more control for Drake, but it's not going to be everything at once. Like, Josh isn't saying, hey, you know, Tom Brady Jr., here's the playbook. He's going to do what Drake is comfortable with. And there's moments where, you know, you saw it last year where Drake, his accuracy is going to kind of be all over the place, especially over the middle. Some passes have sailed and it led to some turnover-worthy throws, but he's not throwing into bad windows. And that's been the biggest thing for me, like in red zone work. I asked Mike Vrabel about it afterwards because there was a day where he was holding on to the ball, but he's not throwing into like any traffic or anything that's turnover-esque. And he was saying, yeah, you'd like to see the ball come out, but also sometimes the Russian 3, and he knows he can kind of sit in the pocket and be comfortable, and those situational details that Vrabel also helps him with. So still a work in progress very early on. It's a passing camp, but I do think the level of comfort that I saw from Drake in this offense that is so notorious for being tough on quarterbacks, I think he looks a lot more comfortable than people probably expected.
If I gave you the over-under of, let's say, 22.5 touchdown passes, you're taking the over the under.
I would. I still have questions about this receiving core, I will say, but Diggs is looking pretty good, so I'll take the over. Just because if you have like pros and a talented quarterback in a Josh McDaniels offense, I think you're going to be okay. And that's kind of the situation and the vibe I'm starting to feel. Although, again, there are some things I'd like to see change by the time we get to training camp preseason.
Talking about the receivers, this is like quietly a very, I don't want to say loaded. It's just like there's too many guys there right now where not all of them are going to make it. You got Jalen Polk, Kendrick Bourne, Pop Douglas, Stefon Diggs, Mac Hollins, who just signed as a free agent. Kyle Williams, they just drafted. I mean, that's 6 right there, not to mention everybody else who, is brought in for those depth purposes. If you had to guess which guy or guys might be either let go before the season starts or maybe traded, who are those names that you're kind of circling as those fringe guys?
Kendrick Bourne probably at the top of my list. He's a guy that was mentioned when they were trying to trade for Brandon Ayuk last year. And you can understand why. Now, first of all, I will say Kendrick Bourne had like one of his best seasons with Josh McDaniels. I think Josh understands what Kendrick's skill set is, how he learns, and they work very well together. That said, it feels like they keep trying to replace Kendrick Bourne. Like what he does is he's the Z, right? So he's going to block for you. He's going to be in motion. He's going to be outside, but you can move him around a little bit.
Right.
But really, like that's what you want Stefon Diggs doing on passing situations. Like you want him as that kind of chess piece because he's reliable. He's, the pro in the room, just all those, all those traits you described for a 30-year-old who's still in the league, but actually still kicking it. So then you have Mac Hollins as well, who on early downs, you think you want him near the formation. You want him blocking and being that like basically a tight end who's in a wide receiver's body. So where does Kendrick Bourne play? Now, I will say Mac Hollins has basically been watching because I don't know, he has some undisclosed injury, but he didn't practice at all. So he could start on PUP. We have no idea. Stefon Diggs still hasn't been 100%. He's participated in slower drills, nothing full speed, but he also looks very good for a 32 or 31-year-old coming off a torn ACL. I really do think he could play week 1. It just feels like there's a lot of people who could play Kendrick Bourne's role and are actually better in that role, but are being forced to play elsewhere, like a Kayshon Boutte. So I would put Kendrick up there. And actually, now that I mentioned Kayshon Boutte, him as well, I think he has an inside track to the roster because they don't have a legitimate X receiver. But Boutte isn't really one either, and he didn't do a whole lot in this passing camp where everything's supposed to be in the receiver's favor. Only times I really noticed him were when he was catching curl routes. And that's not, the best recipe for success, even though Josh McDaniels loves his sacrificial X. So if Kyle Williams pops off and gets some trust there with Drake Maye, I think Kayshon Boutte could be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up there's guys that do Kendrick Bourne's job a little bit better. It's like, if he's Diet Mountain Dew and Stefon Diggs is Baja Blast. Is that maybe a good comp there?
I think that's kind of perfect.
There we go. Yeah. Now I'm gonna have to get a crunch wrap later.
I would last night, honestly, and now you got me thinking about going back. So
that's what friends are for. Is there anybody maybe flying under the radar on offense that you could see having maybe not, a Pro Bowl or All Pro year, but a guy who could be an under the radar contributor by week 10? We're talking about, okay, I didn't see this coming.
I mean, Demario Douglas, and I don't know how much of a surprise that is because every year he's only been in the league for 3 years, but every year you can see why Demario Douglas should be very productive. Now, as a rookie, there were a ton of issues. Like he's a really young guy trying to get used to this new offense, and then he had Bill O'Brien that year, so it's not the easiest offense to be in as a young guy with a gun-shy quarterback. A ton of yards were left on the field his first year, but also you could see where his IQ against zone and some scramble situations, he needed to be better. Last year, you could see there was growth, but he and Drake weren't always on the same page, and Jacoby and Drake both had issues hitting him in stride. He's a smaller guy, but he's also getting wide open pretty consistently. But again, you wanted to see some of the IQ stuff develop. This year in this Josh McDaniels offense, he's like, I love this system. I can't lie. I've seen all the guys have success doing it, and I understand because it's almost impossible to cover these guys. If you have a receiver who understands this is where the leverage is, I should be breaking here, the way Drake thinks, you should be in pretty good shape. And Pop was going off in minicamp. He's catching multiple touchdowns in red zone work, but still he's productive. And in that area where you don't expect small guys to be productive, Josh is great getting those slot types really involved down there. And he's beating Carlton Davis on crossing routes. So I think that this is an offense where on paper you'd think that Pop was a good fit, but he's smaller. Can he work over the middle consistently? He also had some concussions his first year, but I mean, he was healthy last year. So if he can just keep progressing from what it looks like he was doing in the spring, I think he's going to be a very productive player, probably their most productive.
I think offensive line was very clearly a huge need for them coming into the year. Getting rid of David Andrews and then drafting Will Campbell, signing Morgan Moses, 2 new tackles. The bar's pretty low in terms of taking a step forward, but what do you make of that unit as a whole, through the spring as we, approach training camp?
I think the goal is this needs to be an average unit. And with Josh McDaniels and Drake Maye, that's a combination where you really can say, okay, if they're just all right, we can get by. I think they're going to be a very strong run blocking unit. That's the biggest thing. I think that with Morgan, Moses, and Mike Nwenu, that's the best combo they've had on the right side, I think, since Nwenu's been in the league. Garrett Bradbury, you do not want him one-on-one in passing situations. That's usually the case with centers. I know Bradbury was significantly worse than most, but you're not going to really find a whole lot unless Jared Wilson, who also wasn't participating in the spring, if he steps up and can play, there you have your, guy who's a plus in pass pro, but I do like Bradbury as a run blocker. The biggest question mark for this line, also, of course, Will Campbell on the left side, another guy who gives them a formidable run blocker in different types of schemes. But then left guard is a massive question mark right now. Cole Strange seems like he's had the inside track, but Wes Schweitzer was in that mix. He just retired. We've seen Tyrese Robinson play there, and I don't think he's a guy you really want as more than a backup. And then City So has really only been used on the right side after being a guy you thought maybe could take over last year. Layden Robinson, I thought, was going to take a step forward. He finished last year on a high note. He's buried on the depth chart, despite the fact they don't have a guy. It's really just kind of an open audition. And when I asked Mike Vrabel how the left guard competition looks, he said, I don't know. We don't have pads on, which is a fair response. It's damn spring, because none of my questions are relevant because it's not real football. But the left guard position is a significant question mark. It's one thing having Garrett Bradbury and a guy over there that you like. But when that's a question mark and center's a question mark, the two least important positions on the line relatively, but you don't want two glaring holes on the interior. Right. So if Jared Wilson can either slide in at guard or center, I feel much better about this unit. And again, because they just have veterans and guys who know how to do their jobs, I feel much better than a line that was full of undrafted guys and like third stringers last year. Like, you can't have that. So I think I was hoping for average to like maybe pushing above average. Right now, I think they're teetering more towards average to below average, but still enough that I think they could be, a solid and respectable unit, which they haven't been in a couple of years.
All right, let's talk about that defense because I know you're hype about it. Putting Carlton Davis opposite of Christian Gonzalez, I think, automatically makes them, on paper, a top 3 tandem at that position in the NFL. You get yourself a proven edge rusher in Harold Landry to go with a defensive line core that, I think getting that veteran presence in there is good. Robert Spillane in the middle of the defense now. A lot of new faces on that side of the ball. Is there one in particular that you are more excited about than potentially others?
I am really excited about Spillane. I'll say that. I think he, even for me, kind of flew under the radar. Like, I knew he was productive, but he just wasn't a guy I was watching a ton of tape of. Like, Stunner, Patriots reporter, isn't watching a lot of Raiders games. But when you do study the tape, like, this is going to be a very man-heavy defense. But you also want to create turnovers. Now, Gonzo can do that. Carlton Davis can do that. But when guys have their backs turned, you need the safeties and the linebackers to really be the guys who are getting their hands on passes in terms of stealing them. Spillane is excellent at that. The guy apparently trains blindfolded to improve his spatial awareness, and it works because he makes some plays in coverage where you can feel he has an understanding of who's running behind him and what lanes he needs to kind of get into. I think this is also going to be defense that uses a lot of those mug fronts with Spillane and Christian Ellis or whomever on the line of scrimmage, then popping out. I think that's a great fit for him. Also, Craig Woodson, rookie safety out of Cal, a guy who has a lot of experience in an NFL-type defense where they play a lot of disguise, a lot of different looks, was mostly a strong safety, spent last year at Free where he handled a lot more communications. And that was like the buzzword when everyone talked about Craig Woodson when he was drafted. Communication. Guy who doesn't make a lot of mistakes and also was opportunistic in college. So in terms of the middle of that defense, I'm really excited about them. And it's not a new name, but Christian Barmore, man, Milton Williams, when he was signed, people were saying how, he played with Jalen Carter last year. Who's going to get all that attention? One, kind of disrespectful to Milton Williams. I think he's been a good player for a long time, just on a stacked line. And also, personally, I like Barmore more than Jalen Carter. And I don't think that's even that crazy to say if you go back and watch his 2023. For a guy who was in a system of two gappers where a lot of his job was taking up space and controlling gaps, he was a monster, has always been an excellent pass rusher, but then really his discipline and his integrity as a run defender just went through the roof, and he became that well-rounded player. So I think that interior defensive line is going to be nasty, better depth with Joshua Farmer there. And then another guy, Braden Swinson, as a situational pass rusher, him and Calebon Chason. If Calebon Chason even lets the rookie on the field, I think are going to be guys you're going to hear their names a decent amount.
What do you think the ceiling is for the unit as a whole?
If people stay healthy, and that's the biggest thing, I think. But if this unit stays healthy, I think they could be a top 5 defense. If you have an elite defensive tackle duo, that's going to cover up a lot of issues because you can't get away from good defensive tackles. At some point, they're going to wreck your game. Then you got Spillane. I think really good depth at linebacker for this system where they're going to train these guys up. They're going to be well coached. And it's a lot of veterans. So they're talking about how when they were in installs, they're like, yeah, okay, we know this, but what if the defense does this? Yeah. So they're like already ahead of the curve there. And that was severely lacking last year when you had Hightower, no Bentley, and then Tavai having to take on a lot more responsibility than he probably should have. And then the cornerbacks, and even Marcus Jones in the slot, I think is going to be a formidable player who isn't going to have to be forced outside as much as he was in the past. So when you have the pass rush, a deeper edge group, and sticky coverage, I mean, as long as they're well coached, which I think we can expect they will be, I don't think there's much reason to think they shouldn't be one of the best defenses in the league.
All right, let's look at the rest of the division now, because I think it's safe to say the Bills will probably win the AFC East. I do think it's also safe to say that I could see New England taking a game from Buffalo. And when you look at the Jets and Dolphins, man, I mean, I don't think the Jets or Dolphins are better than New England, especially Miami right now, where, I mean, you and I have talked about this over the past couple of years, the most overrated team in the NFL for like 3 years. And now we're starting to see a little bit of that implode. Jalen Ramsey is going to be going elsewhere. Maybe Tyreek Hill, who knows? But even so, like, I think that whole thing is much closer to ending than it is, taking another step forward. And with the Jets, man, like every time that they go through a new regime, there's some hope, and it's like, okay, maybe this could be the one. But I'm very skeptical about that working until it's shown to me that it can work. So I think right now, definitively to me, they are the second best team in the AFC East.
I would agree. Now, if the Jets had a more respectable thrower at quarterback, I would argue, because I really like how the Jets are built. And I feel like that's always how it is. There's plenty to like about the Jets. It's just like the rot is in such a significant spot. But I do like Aaron Glenn as well. I think he's going to bring a culture to that team that they've really been lacking.
I do too.
Also, no more Aaron Rodgers. I think just that stability and having the coach in charge of the team is going to go a pretty long ways. But I do think the Bills have Josh Allen. I won't say I think the roster got better. If anything, I think this is the second year in a row where I wouldn't say they've improved.
I think they've lateral.
Right. But you don't also say static in the league. So I think Josh Allen's going to get better. And that's when I think the Bills are going to get better because obviously he's a freak. And the Dolphins, man, I'm sorry. It's kind of the opposite of the Jets where I feel like they're tough enough to respect. And I'm like, I can see where they would, rise over expectations. The Dolphins, I just don't see it. I don't think that Mike McDaniel is the guy who is going to turn them into a mentally tough enough team.
You mean Corporal Yeezy Vape isn't the guy who's going to take you to the promised land?
It was cute. And as a person, I feel like he's awesome, but he also seems like the kind of guy who's much better when he's not in the spotlight. Because I just don't think he's the kind of personality, especially for a team like Miami. You're in a city and an environment where you have every incentive to not be the most mentally tough team in the NFL. Yeah. And I think you need somebody who's going to bring that. And I just haven't felt that culture with them in a while. And the star power, I think, is either old or it's inconsistent. And I like some of the additions they made, especially in the interior on both sides of the ball. It feels like they're starting to figure it out, but I just don't have enough faith in them.
That's just not a team that, you said it. That's not a tough team to me. And I think, especially in the AFC, man, where you got to go through Kansas City, Buffalo, you got to go north of Baltimore, potentially Cincinnati. Like,
you'll be tested.
You're going to be tested. Like, there's going to be elements. It's not going to be 80 and sunny in January when you got to go to these places. So I think, that's a team that I've had a fork in for 3 years, and it's just like, okay, keep talking about them, but when the rubber meets the road,
person, I don't have a ton of ground to stand on because teams undefeated, but it's also watch the games. It is incredible to watch how the Patriots specifically just throw up all over themselves, whether they're in Miami or not. It's just like every game feels like, and Tua has his throws. He'll get down the field, but in those critical moments, it feels like you can stop him and you don't. But now it feels like with Vrabel, not that they didn't have it with Bill. I think, there were some extenuating circumstances, but this feels like the time where it's finally like, yes, you are not worse than this team. Maybe they'll show it. I hope so, because I can't take another year of getting or losing in Miami just for ridiculous circumstances. It's weighing on me.
If you had to give a record prediction for this team, what would it be, and where do you see them finishing in the AFC standings?
So I'm notorious around here for saying they had like 13 winnable games. And that's because I think like they've been playing Buffalo a lot closer than people realize.
Last year they were up 14-0 in Buffalo.
Like I'm saying, it's not like it's this crazy game to think that they could actually give the Bills a game. I also think that, again, Vrabel will give them the edge when they actually get in Miami. So I see 13 winnable games, but with the question marks they have, I think it's more reasonable to say like 10 right now. I could see more of the games like the Raiders with the Pete Carroll and like a very talented team, a veteran quarterback. I could see them honestly upsetting the Patriots in that opening game. I could see a few of those close ones slipping away now that I maybe didn't when everything was great and we didn't see them on the field, and possibilities were endless. But I feel like 9 or 10 wins is the most realistic right now. But if things do come together and I think they get better health at receiver and figure out left guard, I could see closer to 12, to be honest, because of the schedule mostly.
Yeah, I think I had them going 10-7 and being the 6th seed in the AFC. So I do see them being one of those teams where it's like, all right, week 13 comes around and the Patriots are, 8-4 and putting together something, or 7-5 and in the thick of a playoff run. And I think a lot of that faith comes from Drake Maye. I said that he was going to be the best quarterback out of this group. Obviously, Jaden Daniels having the year that he had last year kind of put a damper on Drake, but I think coming into the situation that he came into with the complete lack of weapons, the bad offensive line, to be able to do what he did, I'm very excited to see what he can do with all the upgrades that they've made on both sides of the ball. And I think they're going to be a very fun team to watch. And I appreciate you being here to talk about it with me, buddy. What have you we got coming? I obviously know it's the dead period of the NFL, but what can we look forward to once we get back up and running?
Yeah, we're going to be pumping out some content over at Patriots Press Pass, the kind of stuff you have this year, potential accolades, the players to watch, all that good stuff. We're going to be doing a lot of that content on YouTube. And then written, I'm kind of just going to be diving into stuff that interests me schematically. I'm looking at Josh McDaniels' play action scheme right now. Going to be diving into the 4-3 under that I think the Patriots are going to shift to after being really more of a 4-3-4 defense in other years. So that kind of stuff really on the website. So it should be fun.
I love it. All right, everybody. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe. If you're listening as a podcast, give a follow on Spotify, leave a review, do all that fun stuff. We'll be back to finish covering the AFC East next week. So be sure to keep it locked in with the Pump Fake. See you then.